Hello, and welcome back to The Communicative Leader. I'm your host, Dr. Leah O'Million Hodges, but Dr. O to most of you. Today's a really exciting episode. We are opening the hood on level 1 of my new book, Amplifying Your Leadership Voice, From Silent to Speaking Up. So this is part of a series where we're going to look at some of these chapters in greater detail. So if you have your book, you can follow along. If not, there's still so many tips for you. So my friends, I wrote this book because I spent years watching brilliant, high-achieving professionals pay what I call a silent tax. That's the invisible cost of having the best idea in the room, but not having the tools or the confidence to say it out loud. So today we're looking at chapters 2 and 3, where we move from that frustrating silence into the phase of discovery. In our last episode, we pulled back the curtain, the silent toll, that heavy tax we pay in burnout and missed opportunities. And many of you reached out and you said, Leah, I'm ready to speak up, but how do I do this without feeling like a fraud, without feeling like I'm performing? And that question is exactly why we can't just jump into these speaking tips. We need to start with a solid foundation, my friends. You see, if I just said, hey, I need you to be a better communicator, and some of you might be laughing because sometimes that comes up in performance reviews. It is the same as me saying, hey, just go be a better athlete without looking at your current form. It's not helpful. You can't grow a leadership voice if you haven't first mapped it. So today we're going to stop guessing. We're going to dive into what I call the LCAR assessment to see where you actually stand. Then we'll break down these 4 pillars that determine whether people actually listen when you speak. So let's get to work. We're going to start with chapter 2, and I think of this as turning on the lights. So I like to describe chapter 2 as turning on the lights in a dim room. When the lights are low, you might trip over obstacles or feel unsure of where you're standing. But when we flip that switch, that potential that's been there all along finally becomes crystal clear. Most of us have this default way of communicating. We have our natural preferences, our tendencies. Maybe you're the analytical leader who stays quiet during the messy emotional parts of a meeting. Or maybe you're the cheerleader who's great at morale but avoids the direct, tough feedback your team actually needs to grow. Here's what I love about communicating and leadership communication. Neither of those is wrong. Neither of those is right. But if you don't know your default, you can't adapt when the stakes get really high. And that's where this assessment, the LCAR framework I created, comes in. LCAR, it stands for Leader Communication Assessment and Reflection. And I developed this because I wanted you all to have an evidence-based way to measure your strengths. We don't vibe our way into leadership. We measure it. So this assessment looks at 4 specific areas: verbal clarity, digital presence, your nonverbal cues, and your ability to navigate conflict. And there are a number of nuances beneath these major categories. So when you see your scores, that dim room, it disappears. You realize, oh, I'm really great at clarity, but my digital presence is making me look less professional than I am, right? So that's just one example. So while the data helps you to provide that foundation, I want to show you what this looks like in the real world. In this chapter, in my chapter feature Conversation with Leaders, I have my colleagues, Dr. Julia Miravel and Dr. Alex Lyon. They talk about their blueprint for leadership, and the core of that entire blueprint is self-awareness. They argue that you cannot lead a team effectively if you're a stranger to your own communication habits. So, my friends, I'm going to give you a challenge for the week. I want you to take an honest stock moment. Ask yourself, in which room am I the most silent? Is it with your manager? Is it with your peers? Maybe your direct reports? Recognizing the where is one of the first steps of the LCAR process. If you want the full assessment and see your scores, again, you can find that on page 45 of the book. So we're going to move on to chapter 3 now, because once we've turned on the lights and we've mapped where we are, we have to look at what we're actually building. And that brings us again to chapter 3, Inside the Leader's Voice. I say this often, but it bears repeating. Communication is the primary yardstick others use to measure your leadership. What does that mean? If your communication feels shaky or inconsistent, people, fairly or not, assume that your leadership is shaky too. So, to ensure your foundation is rock solid, we focus on what I call 4 pillars of a compelling voice. So, let's break these down one by one. Think about pillar 1. It is clarity. This is your ability to take a complex strategy and make it simple. If you can't explain your why in 2 sentences, you haven't mastered clarity yet. We move on to pillar 2. We're thinking about authenticity. This isn't about oversharing. This is about alignment. Does your outside voice match your inside values? Folks, everyone has a BS detector, right? For leaders, they're really savvy at assessing a leader's motives. Authenticity is what keeps that detector from going off. Pillar 3 is conviction. I call this the charismatic edge. I spoke with Dr. Richard Reed in this chapter, and he explained so beautifully that influence isn't magic. It's science. It's the science of showing up with certainty. It's the difference between saying, I think we should, and the best path forward is. Path 4, emotional intelligence, or EQ. This is kind of your social thermostat. Can you read the room and adjust your temperature to match what the team needs? If they're in a crisis, do you bring the calm, or are you just adding to the heat? Now, I don't want you just to listen to these pillars. I want you to use them. So here's a tactical tip for your next meeting. I want you to pick one of those 4 pillars. If you struggle with clarity, try the so what test. Before you speak, ask yourself, what is the one thing I need my audience to remember? If you can't answer it, you aren't ready to unmute your mic, my friends. I know it might feel like a lot to navigate, but remember, this is a journey and you're not doing it without a map. I genuinely want you to be successful. I want your work life to be a place where you feel valued and energized rather than drained by the tax of silence. Looking ahead in level 2 of the book, we're going to move from discovery to refining. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of nonverbal cues and digital leadership. But for today, your job is the map. I hope these insights from chapters 2 and 3 have helped you start turning on the lights. And remember, this podcast, it's just the preview. The full roadmap, including the LCAR assessment, the deep dive interviews with Julian and Alex and Richard, it's all inside Amplifying Your Leadership Voice. So, my friends, if you're ready to move from silence to influence, click the link in the show notes and grab your copy. Let's stop paying that silent tax today and show everyone what a strong communicative leader you are.